Smokey, what are you doing? Do you, need help with something, or? Oh, hey, don't cry. I'll help. Oh, what is it? Alrighty, let's see what we got here. Did you mean to type LGBTQ? And you want to know what it is? I'll just take that as a yes. Well, the LGBTQ is... hold on a minute. Now, let's begin. Now, first let's start with the name. What does LGBTQ even stand for? Well, L stands for lesbian, which is what I am. G stands for gay. B stands for bisexual. T stands for transgender. And finally, Q stands for queer. Now, sure, we know what the letters stand for, but let's get into what the actual words mean. Now, a lesbian is a woman who is attracted to another woman, or just women in general. And gay, or a homosexual, is a man who is attracted to other men, sort of like the male version of lesbian. And a bisexual person is someone who is attracted to both male and females. Now, transgender doesn't really have to do with attraction, more so identity. A transgender person is basically the opposite of the gender that they were assigned at birth. And finally, the word queer. Queer is a word that describes sexual and gender identities other than straight and cisgender. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people may all identify with the word queer. Oh yes, do you have a question, Smokey? Oh, what does the plus sign stand for? I'm so glad you asked. Now, the plus sign stands for the other sexualities, such as pansexual, asexual, polyamorous, stuff like that. And if you want, I can also tell you about those as well. I'm so glad you said that. Okay, let's start with the simplest one, the pansexual flag. Basically, pansexual just means that you're attracted to all genders. Now, keep in mind there are more than 2 genders, but we'll talk about that later when we get to them. Now let's talk about the next one, polysexual. Now I know what you're probably thinking right now. You're probably thinking, but Alice, didn't you already show us this flag? And wait, why are the colors different? Well, that's because this is a different sexuality. The first one that I showed you was polyamorous. This is polysexual. I'm going to tell you the difference. But first, I'm going to tell you how they're similar. So polyamorous and polysexual both mean that you can be in a relationship with multiple people. But however, the difference between the two is that polyamorous is sort of like pansexual, but with polysexual. But polysexual means that you're sort of limited on the people that you like. But it still means that you're able to be in a relationship with multiple people despite the fact that you're limited on the genders that you like. So in conclusion, no, they are not in fact the same. Let's go ahead and move on to the next sexuality, asexual. Now, asexuality is defined by the lack of sexual attraction. Asexuality is also a spectrum of attraction where people can fall into a subset called gray sexuality. This spectrum includes people who feel sexual attraction infrequently, who only feel sexual attraction under a specific set of circumstances, and more. And sometimes asexual can just mean that you're not attracted to anybody. Now let's move on to the next sexuality, or sexualities, because we're going to be looking at 3. Now these 3 sexualities that we're looking at are genderqueer, agender, and non-binary. Now these 3 sexualities are basically the same thing, but they're not. And just if somebody says that they identify as one of these, don't call them by a different one. Just address them as whatever sexuality that they identify as, because that's the respectful thing to do. But basically, all three of these just mean you don't identify as any gender, and that's completely okay. Now let's go on ahead and move on to the next sexuality. This is the intersex flag. Intersex is an umbrella term for those whose bodies do not align with the gender binary of male and female. Some people can have both sets of genitals, various combinations of chromosomes, or more differences. But I think that no matter what your differences are, you're still a beautiful person. Now let's go on ahead and look at the final sexuality. Now the final one is gender fluid. People who are gender fluid don't identify as one gender, but rather their gender identity shifts between male, female, or somewhere else on the spectrum. How often someone's identity shifts depends on the individual. So just simply, they identify as, well, all genders. Now there still is one more sexuality that we could cover if you want. You're right, it is time for a nap. I'm sorry if I worded some things wrong, please don't come at me, I'm still learning.